Well, news today that GetUp is using a 12-year-old girl to raise money for a national advertising campaign to support the global climate strike. Shouldn't surprise anyone who's watched this mob over the past 10 years or so. But what they do more and more, of course, is finally being seen for what it is. The campaigning work of Labor, unions and the Greens are nothing at all akin to the independent grassroots voice they once claimed they were. But are we all waking up? Is everyone waking up? And who's this minister who's admitted in Parliament today that she had a drug test this morning? Joining me now is Macquarie radio broadcaster Jane Marwick and opinion editor at the Daily Telegraph and outsider extraordinaire James Morrow. So is 12-year-old Lucy out there spruiking for donations on email for GetUp? Is that untoward use of a child, James Morrow?
Yeah, well, look, I think on one level it's untoward. It is absolutely, using this child as kind of a human shield almost. You can't criticize our arguments. It's a 12-year-old girl we've put out there. So it's intellectually, I think, dishonest, but also it shows the dishonesty of this whole idea. Oh, well, it's the kids who are all about the climate strike. Well, no, it's a whole bunch of very cynical adults who are using children, whether it's this kid Lucy here or Greta Thunberg or anybody else. This is what this is all about. It's about a cynical use by adults of children because they want to say, oh, you can't argue with the kids. They're pure, they're innocent. This comes after they've said, oh, well, you can't argue with the experts. They know it all. So, make up your mind, guys. Which one is it?
Yeah, it's interesting, and the letter's out there. It went out on email. I'll put some of it up on screen for you, but there's a quote from the letter where little old Lucy says, I don't want to live in a world where the Great Barrier Reef is just a memory. No more Nemo and Dory, and I don't want to spend my whole life cleaning up the mistakes of leaders like Scott Morrison and Matt Canavan. Well, I tell you, Lucy, if there isn't an economy, there's not much money to clean up anything, is there, James? Jane.
They were the bits I highlighted. They were the bits I highlighted too. Peter, this is so obviously off the back of the success of Greta Thunberg, who all of the left and the United Nations want to take lectures from and interview. It is a cynical ploy. I note that Catherine Greiner, who sort of supports some of the action on climate change, has said that there's a sense of exploitation around that. There certainly is a sense of exploitation. This girl is 12. Just everyone stop and think about yourself as a 12-year-old. I don't know what the parents are doing, allowing her to front this campaign. You're just not old enough to do these sorts of things. She's probably a terrific kid. I know a lot of children now, Peter, who are in this category because it's the only thing they're being taught at school. It's the only thing they're consuming in the media that they're consuming, and they really do think there's a climate emergency. The Greens, you've got Larissa Waters blaming the Queensland Premier and the Prime Minister for those bushfires, not taking any responsibility for not allowing backburns and all the other issues, and children, I'm sorry to say, who may or may not have been arsonists. But I can understand why Lucy is taking this approach, but it is just terrible of the adults behind this at GetUp. I feel the same way about Greta Thunberg, frightening these children into taking this action and sending these pleading letters out. It's disgraceful.
What if it was a 12-year-old James Morrow who was campaigning on the back of Australia's tough border protection regime, or a 12-year-old saying, I'm a future taxpayer and I want to see anyone who's not doing the right thing with their welfare money subjected to a drug testing regime? Would we have the same view, do you think?
Well, Peter, have you been hanging around my dinner table and listening to my kids? Because, I think maybe, they're going for one of these gigs here you're talking about. Look, I just think that politicizing kids is inappropriate. I don't think that it's appropriate for either side of politics to get out there, put a kid out there, whatever they're going to say, and say, make this person the face of an argument, a scientific argument, an economic argument, an intellectual argument, when what you're trying to do there is say, now we are uncriticizable because, you're going to argue with a child. How can you do that? How can you deny this child what he or she wants? So I think it's just intellectually dishonest. If you're talking about somebody older, 16, 17, then, we're past that sort of age of reason point. But this just feels so confected, so contrived. And I'll tell you what, Peter, we've seen all the polling out this week. We've seen what people are saying, Australians are saying. They're seeing through GetUp. They're seeing through all of this activism. They're seeing through, on border protection, all of the loony left stuff of Christina Keneally from Labor and telling Labor, get back to the sensible centre. I think that this is just an act of desperation. I think that's the way we have to read it. They're desperate because now they are simply using children because they've got nothing else.
Jane, I did laugh at your comment there about the kids obviously not being taught much at school beyond climate change. And I was watching Question Time today. There was a fantastic little exchange. Clearly, Michael McCormack, who's the leader of the National Party, Deputy Prime Minister, feels that he had a better education, taught well on issues like grammar, and that the member for Ballarat probably needs a bit of a lesson herself. So I don't think complaints about what people are taught and not taught at school is specific to one particular age group. I think it's widespread. We might have a grab I can show viewers at home.
The member for Ballarat on a point of order.
Thank you. Just on relevance, I asked a question about which is right, the Prime Minister or the Reserve.
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Pardon me for correcting your grammar, but it wouldn't be which to be who. People are actually who, but, you know. Mrs Kenzie, she taught me a lot in English in St Michael's School. I'm sure she probably, Mrs Lynn Kenzie, I'm sure she
Members
taught
on my left
as well.
I mean, here, Jane, there's not enough attention to grammar, either in speech or written language. But I tell you what, as soon as he said that, I thought, oh, they're going to go after him now because she's a woman and there'll be some excuse or whatever. But she's old enough to know better, I reckon.
I saw that and thought it was a really, really funny moment. Hasn't Michael McCormack been interesting in Question Time over the last couple of days, Peter? He's certainly found his mojo. He's been very angry with Joel Fitzgibbon, and I don't know if we'll get to that later, but I was actually pleased to see politicians angry about the drought and what's going on in drought-affected areas and Queensland. But Michael McCormack, we're seeing a different side to him. Just back to school, my point is these children feel afraid, and that's my issue with it, the fear-mongering that's going on, and it's coming at them from every single aspect of their lives. I feel sorry for them. I don't feel like they're getting a childhood, Peter.
I want to play a grab out of the Senate too. I don't often play something out of the Senate. For 10 years in the Howard government, I sat there as a Senate advisor. I have a bit of a soft spot for the Red House. But Anne Rushton, she's the minister responsible for legislation in relation to the drug testing trial for welfare recipients. I think she shocked a few colleagues today with this comment, and now they're all terrified that she'll be waiting outside the chamber asking them to do what she did today.
Pleased to advise the Senate that this morning I took a drug test, and anybody in this place is welcome to go and have a drug test. They're in this building, but the main reason that they're here is so you can go and assure yourselves of the process of undertaking a drug test. It's very, very commonplace in my many, many workplaces.
Yeah, I did watch the raised eyebrows of her colleague Dean Smith sitting behind there. James, do you think people will take her up on that offer?
Yeah, I rather doubt that she's going to get a lot of people taking her up with the offer, but I thought that the point that she was making was not an unsound one. I mean, in an awful lot of jobs, you know, you do have to be drug tested, you have to be alcohol tested, breath tested in some of the mines and in resources companies and things like that, because they really take that sort of safety thing very seriously. So I don't see why there's such a hoo-ha over this whole idea about drug testing people who are on the public purse.
Hey, now, just before we go, I don't want to miss this issue. 18 years since 9/11, a tweet went out from the New York Times today, and I put it up on the screen for people to read. They say 18 years have passed since aeroplanes took aim and brought down the World Trade Center. Now, this caused a furore, James. It's been pulled down, but of course it's not the airplanes that did the damage, it's the people who piloted them and the nasty, terrible philosophy behind it all.
Well, that's right, Peta. I mean, and, you know, I saw this last night and I was just horrified. You know, I mean, I'm a New Yorker myself, and, you know, this is a time when we all stop and reflect on that. For that sort of passive voice, just the airplanes, and, you know, maybe they were airplanes of peace even, we could even go so far as to say. It was just such a bizarre thing for the New York Times, which always is trying to do this sort of weird thing, where there was passive voice, don't want to assign responsibility, and thank God they took it down, but they really showed their hand with that.
Yeah, 18 years have passed since Islamic extremists crashed planes into buildings in a great city like New York, and we should never forget that for a moment. Jane and James, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.